The Goodnight Buffalo Ranch that he had here was, as I said, when he was older, and in many ways it must have been a delight for him because he was very interested in cattle breeding and had developed the JA Ranch. And up here he thought of how the buffalo was so well suited to this area, and he worked with the Black Angus and the buffalo to breed, hopefully, a new breed of cattle that could stand these cold winters and hot summers and lack of rain and so on. And this was called the Catalo. And it never took off big, but he did have quite a good-sized herd of the Catalo, and was relatively successful. I read in the paper not very long ago, someone farther north up in Montana, I believe, is now breeding something called the Beefalo, which is basically the same thing Goodnight did many, many years ago. He was very interested in plants. He was called the Luther Burbank of the Plains, and he and Luther Burbank had quite a correspondence going at one time, him needing advice on what would grow in this area. There's a lake down from our place called Spring Creek Lake there wasn't a tree around it, and he planted trees. There are walnut trees down there, and apple trees and persimmon trees. He put water lilies in the lake, stocked it with fish. You can't even compare what it was with what he developed, and he was always working with plants and developing the area. He had quite a few sheep here, and then he worked with the buffalo. The buffalo pasture was quite a bit of this area of this ranch that was his place that he kept the buffalo herds. Mr. Sam Burrow, who lived about a mile from us, worked with the buffalo herd all the time. We have a picture in the museum where he has his gun strapped around his waist. You just didn't work with the buffalo without some protection. They're not something you just walk up to. They can go over a fence or through a fence with relative ease. My dad used to laugh and say of them that buffalo would go through a fence to greener grass on the other side, and then they'd come back a few feet down and tear out more fence. He rebuilt a lot of fence taking care of buffalo. I remember one time when I was a child and the ranch had sold, and they still had this buffalo herd, and they weren't quite sure just what to do with it, the new owners, that is. And they asked Dad the herd had gone down on the JA, and they wanted it back, and would he go get them? And he saddled his horse, and he put on his ivory-handled pistol, and threw his bedroll on, and was gone 2 or 3 days before he brought that herd back. And I know some of the cowboys from the ranch came by and said, if he doesn't show up by tomorrow, we'll go after him. But I can remember it was kind of a big thing to see your dad, when you were just a child, saddle that horse and leave, and wouldn't be back for a few days trying to bring back the buffalo herd to the old Goodnight Ranch. The JA didn't particularly want them down there either, and because they did tear fences. And the new owners wanted them back on this ranch.
What did your dad bring down there to round them up? His gun?
He said you didn't really just go right up to them and turn them like you do cattle on horseback. It was best to, they had a wooden bullet, and if you kind of hit them with the side of the head, they'd turn, but you didn't want to, they didn't pay much attention to a horse. Now, whether they've become more tame nowadays, I don't know, but at that time, they just kind of did what they wanted to do. Well, as the town developed, of course, most of the people, or a lot of the people, worked the ranch. A lot of families lived on the ranch. He was very interested in the town. In fact, the whole Panhandle. He and some other ranchers started the first school in the Panhandle. At Goodnight, the land for the school was given by him. He, through contact with Mr. and Mrs. Buckner in Dallas, he started an orphan's home to take care of the children that needed care, and it was right there at Goodnight. He, by the way, there's an interesting story about when, I don't know whether it was financial, fewer orphans to take care of, but when they decided to do away with the home at Goodnight, this was after Charles Goodnight had passed away, when they decided to close it and take any of the orphans that were left back to Dallas, well, the whole town turned out to wave goodbye to the orphan train that was going back to Dallas. Many tears, because the children had gone to the school there and were a part of the community. Many of them did not go. They were adopted by different families. But that's one of the stories of Goodnight, is the orphan train. And I mean by that the community. The orphan train taking all of them back to Dallas that were still here. He did the orphans home. He started Goodnight College here. And a lot of the young people in the area, this is where they got their higher education. It was rather a large college for the time, more than you would think, and that history has been pretty well recorded about the Goodnight College. Up until 15 years ago or so, the graduates, there were still some that would come back here for their reunion, and it was interesting to go to their college reunion here, graduates of the Goodnight College.